Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're so excited. Thank you, Matt, for being here. I'm Conceithia Campbell here on the marketing team at Swivl. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you as we continue on this exciting journey with AI. In today's ever-evolving educational landscape, adaptability isn't merely a virtue, it's an absolute necessity. We are firmly planted in the age of AI, where technology is reshaping the way that all of us learn and the way that we teach. In recognition of this transformation, we proudly introduced the Swivl Adaptability Initiative. Through this groundbreaking initiative, we're forging partnerships with schools and districts to cultivate dynamic learning communities that can transform innovative ideas into actionable strategies. Our focus is on equipping educators with the skills needed to thrive and survive in AI, while also embracing the adaptability needed to conquer any new challenges. So a vital component of our adaptability initiative is our collaboration with esteemed thought leaders like Matt Winters. So we have Matt here tonight for our adaptability initiative webinar series. As an added bonus, for those of you who attended or viewed the webinar presented in an e-learning module at the end of the week, we are pleased to offer a certificate of attendance for PD hours. We'll discuss them more at the closing of the webinar. The certificate can be accessed on our website, demonstrating our commitment to supporting your ongoing growth and development. Thank you for joining us on this ongoing journey of adaptability and transformation. Together, we can shape the future of education and empower our communities for success in an ever-changing world. So for those eager to learn more about our adaptability initiative, we'll be dropping the link in the chat. Now, I would love to introduce our presenter for the evening, Matt Winters. So excited to have you, Matt. Matt is a product manager and statewide trainer for Utah Education Network, specializing in Google Workspace for Education. He is also a Google Educator Group Utah co-leader and the Utah Coalition for Educational Technology president for the 2022 to 2024 term. He is one of the International Society for Technology and Education's 20 to Watch in 2023 and Tech and Learning's Best Example of Professional Development. Matt is a former English language arts teacher at the secondary and college level. He has been a podcaster for the last 5 years, and he is the UCET podcast host, and now he is with UN Homeroom. Matt, thank you for today's session, and we can't wait to hear from you. Take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Conceithia. It's weird hearing all of the things that you do in one synopsis paragraph. So thank you so much for that. And so good to be here with you all today. As we're going through, I've dropped the resources in the chat, so feel free to grab those. That'll take you to this website right here, teacherwinners.net. This has the slides and a little explanation of how I came to kind of build this seminar today. So feel free to grab that in the chat and share it with whoever you'd like. I'm open source and my job's open source, so I want everyone to feel free to reach out and use it. On top of that, folks, as we're going through the presentation, if you have questions, if you have ideas, if I say something and you're like, oh, I want to know more, feel free to drop it in the chat. I would be more than happy to answer any questions you have throughout the presentation, but also at the end as well. So I'm going to jump over into my slide deck now and let's get this presented. So first off, folks, welcome. It's great to have you here. I just want to talk a little bit about my side job. A few years ago, I decided to, on a whim, buy a very nice Sony digital camera, and I wanted to go out and take pictures of things that I'd always wanted to see. And John has already hit it. This is Bixby Canyon Bridge over Bixby Creek on Highway 1, just outside of San Francisco in Big Sur. And it was a bucket list photo for me. It was a great day. I got some great cloud cover, and the ocean was a deep, deep turquoise blue. But I've been trying to figure out for myself over the last couple of years, as I've figured out photography and done some really fun stuff for myself, how to harness my own creativity and use it in interesting ways. And it's part of it has been maintaining my own curiosity for photography. Sometimes with hobbies or new things in our lives, we have a tendency to forget about those things or we get frustrated with them. And I've been trying to establish that. And we're going to talk a lot about AI tonight. We're going to talk a lot about technology, but really the two keywords for tonight as we go through are caution and curiosity. And so if you walk away thinking two words, those are the words I want you to think about, is curiosity and caution. So a little bit, just you've already heard my bio. I just want to point out a couple things. First of all, I am giant. Zoom does me no benefits. I'm 6'6" and very large man. I'm also a nerd, so I'm a giant nerd. So feel free to use that one. It's one of my favorites. But also on here, my email, my Twitter account, feel free to reach out. I love collaborating with people from all over the country. So feel free to get working with me if you'd like to. Big thing on this slide, though, is a photo that I took with the same digital camera. I took that picture of Bixby Canyon Bridge. This is me last year on Banned Books Day, and I was asked to pull out by a friend of mine in Texas my favorite banned book. And this book right here, Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, happens to be not only my favorite book, but also my favorite banned book. It is an absolute powerhouse of a novel, and it changed my life. When I was 16 years old, I had a teacher, a wonderful English teacher, who pulled me aside and told me, Matt, I can't tell you to read this book, but you should read this book. And I went, oh, that's a cool name. Interesting. I didn't think too much about it. This was like April, May of the school year. And when the school year ended, I ended up having one of those boring summer days where I didn't know what to do with myself. And I went to the library, as future English teachers are wont to do. And I picked up a copy of The Children's Crusade, which is the original title for Slaughterhouse-Five. And that night I went home, I read the book, I read it again the next day, I read it again the next day after that. And it was one of the most formative experiences of my life. And I came back to school the next year for school, and I saw that same English teacher, and I told her, I think I want to do what you do. And that was where I really started to think about teaching as a profession, where it had never been an option for me. And I did it. I went and got my master's degree in English. I then got my second master's in education. And I got my teaching license and started teaching about 8-10 years ago. And one of the things I learned very quickly is that there was a disconnect in between what I was telling my students to do and what I was doing. I was telling my students every day, you should be a reader, go home, read a book. Here's a great list of books. Here's all the books you should be reading. Here's all these wonderful things that you can get into for books. And then I was going home and I was watching reruns of The Office because I was tired. I had exhausted myself during grad school and I didn't feel like reading too often. And so all of a sudden I found myself, there was a disconnect between what I was telling my students to do versus what I was doing myself. And so I started to remedy this in 2018. I started reading quite a bit. And this year I've really hit the challenge hard. This is the books I've read from May to August of 2023. Lots of great books on here. Ken Robinson's Out of Our Mind is fantastic. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Murray. Fantastic book as well. And I've been reading a ton, and I'm up over almost to 100 books this year. Not because there was anybody pushing me to do it, but because I wanted to connect what I was espousing. Let's go out and read. Let's enjoy literature, to what I actually was doing with my life. And at that time, 5-6 years ago, I wasn't doing that. And now I am. I'm a much happier person because of it. And come to find out, this is actually something we do quite common as human beings. There's this idea of action versus perceived action. What we do versus what we think we do. And we see this all the time in education, but we also see this in medical science. This is a book called Value of Nothing. It's an economics book, so if you're interested, you can track it down. But basically, in this book, the author talks about this thing called Anton syndrome. What Anton syndrome is basically the idea that you can be proven to be medically blind. The doctors know that you are blind. There's medical backing to the fact that you cannot see, but you claim that you can see. You deny that vision loss. Famous case in the 1860s, there's a patient with Anton syndrome and a doctor. The Anton syndrome patient says, oh, well, what a beautiful window over there. The light's beautiful today. What a great haircut. The nurse is beautiful. No nurse, no haircut. It was nighttime. And it shows this disconnect that we have sometimes between what we actually have as actions for how we perceive our actions. And just kind of continuing on the metaphor here, we see this all the time in pop culture. Andy Dwyer from Parks and Recreation, eating chili off a Frisbee is my favorite example of him. Hardcore Parkour from Michael Scott from The Office, the classic example there. And my favorite one, Homer Simpson, riding down the hill, thinking he's going to jump a giant gulch on a skateboard, but he doesn't quite get there. So we see this all the time where we disconnect the action that we are trying to espouse versus the perceived action. And one of the places where we see this quite common, especially in education, is our curiosity. Teachers tell our students very often, you need to be curious. Go out there, explore, see the world, see what's available to you as a student. And often we're not very curious ourselves. And it's really hard to instill curiosity into a student when we're not curious ourselves. Michael Bonner, who's a great speaker, former elementary educator from Atlanta, says that passion is the intersection of anger and love. which I think is such a great definition for passion. Passion is one of those things that we can see every time we have a staff meeting, every time that we have kind of arguments or discussions in education, because equally we love what we do and sometimes we hate what we do, and we need to respect that and have some ideas about it. But the big thing about curiosity along with passion is that it is really hard to exemplify that when we're not doing it ourselves, and we have to get our curiosity back. We have to share that with our students and engage with them appropriately. But it's hard to get passion and curiosity going when for something that we don't love. Kind of a controversial thing here. One of the things I absolutely hate is Neil Diamond. I just don't like him as a singer. My wife can attest to this. One of the first times I have a big music collection. I was a radio DJ for a long time. And she asked me, is there ever an artist you don't like listening to? Is there somebody like a genre you don't like? And I said Neil Diamond immediately. There's just something about Sweet Caroline that rubs me the wrong way. Could I write an essay about Sweet Caroline? Could I write a good essay about Neil Diamond? Probably. But I'd be happy if I got a C, because there's no passion there to really help me to explore what's going on in that space with that singer. And for teachers, the thing that most of them have a really hard time with right now is technology. I'm a firm believer that we have some technology trauma as education from the last couple of years in education, particularly COVID shutdowns. It's teachers have a hard time integrating new technology into their classrooms. They have a hard time integrating it in ways that are effective. And sometimes it can be technology overload for them. And that can create situations where it's hard for us to develop passion and excitement about the technology in our classrooms. Sometimes we just have to take a second, like Ron Swanson here, and just agree that technology can sometimes be the worst. The fall of 2020, when we came back to school in the building that I was working in, I had a teacher who came into me about a month into school and said, I'm going to break my computer in half because I can't work with Canvas. It's too difficult for me. And rather than push back on that and be like, we have to figure this out, the first thing I did is sit down with her for a couple of her prep hours and listen. What were the problems she was having, cataloging some of those worries and letting her get those out. And then we figured out inroads for that teacher to work towards better things in her classroom with Canvas. But starting from a general point of, it's the worst, can really help us to get into a good place with our teachers. And part of that is because it's just so overwhelming. This is just a small sample of the educational technology companies that I get emails from throughout the week. Some of them get deleted, some of them I read. It depends on the time of day and things like that, for just like everyone else. But there's so many companies who are vying for our attention and our time. And some of these companies are doing it better than others, those sorts of things. But also on top of that, when we work with some of these companies, it's getting even more overwhelming. So a couple of these companies, like for instance, ChatGPT right here, DALL-E, those are AI specific companies. They're both part of OpenAI, and they're really pushing that agenda of AI and AI generally, but helping people who want to get into AI into schools. But what a lot of educators don't understand when we look at this massive companies is that all of these, for the most part, have some sort of AI component. Google has Bard. We're seeing some AI with Nearpod and with Adobe. We're seeing some AI definitely with Canvas being integrated into it, with Khan Academy and Khanmigo. Microsoft has Bing. There's so many different AI companies in there, and this just isn't going anywhere. But it's completely overwhelming for us. So what do we do with that? Well, we have to start from the bottom. ChatGPT is just a starting point. I mean, that hit almost 9 months or 10 months ago now in education. And now we're starting to see a lot of interesting stories coming out in law cases and those sorts of things. But we're also starting to see lots of derivations of that could be affecting our classroom. So here's 4 examples I just want to go through really quickly. If you've heard of these before, feel free to toss them in the chat, and I'd love to see what you're using them for. The first one is this company called Poised. This is not some random company that's out there addressing AI needs. They're working with Fortune 500 companies and have been for a while. What this company does is it attaches to Zoom or other video conferencing software, and it gives you real-time tracking of how you are talking to your audience on that call. Maybe your posture isn't great. Maybe you're not smiling enough. Maybe the way you phrase something isn't quite right. And the AI is looking for those things and giving that feedback to you in real time. I had the opportunity this last week to speak with Richard Collada during an event here in Utah. And he said that one of the things that stood out to me in his book for Digital for Good, is that we talked about it, was that students that graduate this year, by the time they finish college, will have one non-human partner in their work process. They'll be working with non-human entities. And this is a great example of that for our students. Now, it's a logical leap to see it in our classrooms and things like that. We're not quite there yet, but it might be headed that way. The second one, folks, is this one called synesthesia. And I have to go back to 2003 for just a minute. I had this great professor in high school and college, Mr. James, who he told me in 2003, one of his students at the college level decided that he didn't have enough sources for his article that was in his class. And so he decided to make his own website where he cited himself as an expert on the topic and then cited the website as a source in his paper. And at the time, he and I had a good laugh about how ridiculous that was, how much time he spent on that, especially in 2003. I was a little bit harder to do it than now. And I think about that with synesthesia, because with synesthesia, for a low price, students can log in with a written script and an AI will generate a person. So this lady right here in this picture, she's not real, nor are any of the other people over here that you could select. It will speak your script exactly how you wrote it, and then you can export that video to any number of video platforms, YouTube, Instagram, those sorts of things. I think about that in terms of AI in our classrooms, and it scares me. That's a very clear pathway to misinformation and disinformation, because it looks like somebody's actually talking to you. The third one, folks, is perplexity. This is an example of one that I think is actually really good. And as I've talked to more AI companies, I think more about this particular product, but then how other companies are kind of mimicking the process. With perplexity, there's no login, and you can go to this and explore a great question and answer kind of research assistant. So user asks a question, Perplexity gives you back an answer, and then it gives you all of the sources that you pulled, or that it pulled to answer your question, and it gives you this great Wikipedia-like article basically about your question. Now, what's nice about that is it also cites your sources in text, which as an English teacher, recovering English teacher, it's such a great thing to see an AI citing in-text sources. But it's an interesting thing to see that happening, and it's a great example of what AI could do. The fourth one here, folks, is DALL-E, which if you haven't explored image generation or image generative AIs, this is absolutely fascinating. DALL-E is a great one. You have to pay a little bit of money, but you could get into Midjourney. There's tons of these. Firefly from Adobe is a great example. But these are starting to spark conversations about visual art, ownership, and creative processes that I think are really interesting for us as educators, but also for our students. There's a circuit court case that came down last month, or actually in August, where AI generated, if a piece of artwork is generated with AI, it can't be copyrighted. And it's the first in kind of first case of what will probably be many, where it is being challenged as an artistic means. And we're seeing interesting things come out of record labels like Warner Brothers and a few other record labels, where they're trying to sell their back catalog to AI companies to generate specific vocalists for AI tracks. And it's opening up some interesting doors for us and our students. And it's getting very, very good, very, very quickly. This is from a Twitter person named Hey Barcy. By the way, I refuse to call it X, this Twitter. Hey Barcy, he's just great to follow because he shares a lot about AI. But this shows Midjourney, which is an image generator that runs on Discord, version 1, which was last year, all the way up to version 5. And this is Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson. It starts out looking like Emperor Palpatine, and we end up looking like something from the Queen's Gallery in London. I think it's really interesting how quickly these are generating and changing, and what that's going to do to affect our conversations about dis, and malinformation in our students' lives. And John asked a great question about how customizable is the avatar in synesthesia. Some of them are very customizable, some of them are not, but we're also seeing other companies that are matching this and doing completely odd things like having AI generated animals and things like that speak. And so it's interesting to see that video software and the image software changing our perceptions of what information is getting out to our students. And with that said, AI is not really going anywhere. There's this great website, I hate the name, but it's great to see tracking. It's called Futurepedia. And if you're interested, you can go check this out. When I updated this slide about 3 weeks ago, it was 4,000 tools, over 4,000 tools available for AI that utilize AI to generate something for you. However, that has gone up. Last time I checked, it was around 5,500, I believe, just a couple days ago. The proliferation of AI tools is just skyrocketing. It very much reminds me and other people that I've talked to in my area here in Utah of the proliferation of .com in 1999, 2000, that area. And so for our teachers, trying to figure out all the AI tools, trying to find all of them and work them through and know all of them is plain whack-a-mole. It would take you literal years if you just did one a day to figure out all those AI tools and see what they're doing in your classroom. And your students are a lot of them are very savvy. They're going to figure out these tools faster than we do. And it's more important to look for the hallmarks of AI in our work and how it can affect our students, or figure out ways to make AI assignments with AI in mind. So with that said, there are a million ways for our students to show their learning in the digital world. We can have them do all sorts of projects that weren't available to us just a few years ago. Things like podcasts or video production, creativity projects with art, any discipline. The problem is that in the 21st century, traditional exams and essays in any classroom, if they are the only assessment, then you're doing them a disservice. Our students live in a very creative world, and they can do a ton with the technology that are available to them just on a cell phone. And realistically, when they get into their jobs, whatever career they choose, they're not going to be just writing assignments and doing multiple choice tests. They're going to be completing projects and developing all sorts of things for their jobs. And if we only are assessing our students on traditional exams and essays, we are doing them a disservice. A couple of weeks ago, I was giving a similar presentation here in Utah to a group of teachers down in the Provo area. And one of the teachers said, I had this great assignment that I did with my students. I had them write a poem about Frankenstein. That's fantastic. That's a great creative idea. And she's like, I took the prompt and I plugged it into ChatGPT, and I was like, how'd it do? And she was like, well, it was okay. And that's the problem right there that we're seeing with AI. A lot of AI can do the assignment, but it's to an okay level. If an AI can do your assignment as well as a human, or to a level of like a C grade, that assignment needs to be redesigned and rethought. Now, it might be thinking about process over product. So maybe we're thinking less about the end goal of the project and what the thing that the students are going to create, and thinking more about how the students get there and documenting that process through a variety of means. Maybe we're thinking about adding things that are more creative and add things that AI can't do or are harder to do with AI. Maybe we're trying to hit multiple standards and do multidisciplinary work. There's lots of different ways to work it through, but if your AI can do your assignment to a level where you look at it and go, yeah, it's pretty good, it needs to be redesigned and rethought, because your students are going to be thinking that way as well. But also, who wants just an okay poem about Frankenstein? I want a great poem about Frankenstein that my student wrote and poured their heart into. So what can we do to help help our students, help ourselves, help our teachers if you're in a coaching or a kind of a district or state position? Well, there's a couple simple changes that we can work to. And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier with my photography and things that I've done with teachers across the world, or across the country. First off is help them find that passion for technology that they didn't know they had, or that we all know is there. They just have buried it. I have a great example. I had a teacher in my old building. He was a teacher who always sat behind his desk every day. It was, I'm going to come in, sit down, I have my drink, turn on the computer, turn on my projector, and I sit there and the students come to me. Walked by him one day and he pulled me in and he said, I really want to do something with video. And it kind of took me by surprise. And I said, why? It's like, well, I make these videos that go up on YouTube for my bikes my bike rides that I go and do over here, all over the state of Utah. And I went, that's amazing. Yeah, let's do some video work. And over the course of that next couple of weeks, I showed him how to edit video. I showed him how to do a webinar, like basically a webinar series for his classroom. And by the end of the school year, he was creating digital puppets and doing all sorts of amazing things with video production because he developed his passion for it. So we have to look for inroads in ourselves, whether it be photography, video, audio recording, whatever. Or we got to find inroads with the people around us, the other teachers and educators in our buildings. Always finding small challenges to keep ourselves engaged. Like I said, with photography, I was looking for great little pieces that I could shoot, that I'm going on a trip. I'm going here in the state of Utah. I'm going to, go out there and do some night photography, or I'm going to go, take some pictures of this wonderful canyon. But in education, finding different ways to work it through. Maybe it's a new technology that our district is embracing, or an idea that the district is trying to get across from our state level. And we just need to take a few minutes every day to work it through. I had a great student teacher a few years ago, and she told me one day she confessed that she had never heard of Google Drive before my classroom. And I spent some time with her the rest of the semester really working through how we develop technology. And I would challenge her every day to find 5 minutes in our workday to develop a skill that she would use down the line in her own teaching. You got to find some time to take breaks to avoid burnout. Everybody knows that at this point. And if they don't, remind them of this. It's very important that we all take a little bit of time off from technology sometimes. One of my favorite things, I was down at university here in Utah a couple of days ago, and I told the student teachers there, if you are thinking you have to apply technology to every single class day, you're doing it wrong. What you want to think about is the technology follows my curriculum. And some days, the most technology I would use in my classroom was a sheet of paper and a pencil. It's okay to have days where there's no technology, and it's okay to take some breaks from challenging ourselves. The last one is finding a mentor and not being afraid to ask questions. I found some great mentors through Twitter. I found some great mentors through different programs like ISTE and ASCD, but also here in the state of Utah, I have some wonderful colleagues that I work with that challenge me weekly to do amazing things in the state of Utah. And so finding someone, whether they are there in your space or geographically farther away, that's okay. Sir Ken Robinson, who is he's kind of my educational hero. I think of him as a mentor because in a couple of his books, he mentions that a mentor can be anyone alive or dead, and geographically close or geographically far away. And I consider him to be a mentor of mine that I return to his texts and read through them when I need some inspiration. So find somebody that you can help you to address the things that you are really nervous about in your teaching. A couple things to try here. I got to shout out the work of Dan Ryder and Jackie Gardy, lovely people from the East Coast, Maine and Maryland, who made this great program called Panels and Perspective, creating comments in the EFL classroom. Check it out. It's free through the State Department. It's trying something new, whether it be comic books, podcasting, videos, AR, VR, adding AI. Maybe you're doing something where you can check those sorts of things. And then doing some social media like posts. I love explainer videos. I used to do those all the time with my students in my yearbook class. Those sorts of things, trying those new things can really help us to boost our creativity, boost our technology use, and to challenge ourselves to do something a little different that maybe an AI can't match, but also gets our students excited and encouraged so that they don't necessarily want to turn to an AI to cheat with it. One of my favorite examples that I was talking to a teacher about this summer with podcasting, it would take literal hours and hours and hours of recording to get an AI voice that's your own to do the recording for you. So it's easier just to let the students record, but also things like podcasting, videos, comic books, those can be cross-curricular and cross-standard as well. I used to use video or audio recording all the time in my class because if a student records what their response is to a text, then I'm hitting a couple of standards in my ELA background. So I'm having them talk about the literature, but I'm also hitting some speaking and listening standards and then comprehension standards. So it can be cross-standard as well. The last little bit here, folks, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. We got a couple of questions in the chat that I'll address here, but the big thing is as we move deeper and deeper into this AI-infused world that we're going to live in and our students are going to have jobs and careers in, the last thing we want to do is not have conversations about AI and what it's doing to our classrooms, but also not model good AI use with our students. If we're using AI to do all of our work for us as teachers, then maybe we need to rethink what we're doing because there's some really great power in modeling with our students. Again, feel free to reach out. Emails right there. I have a couple different ones. I put a different one at the beginning, matt@teacherwinners.net. This is my work email, mwinners@uen.org. I'm also available via Twitter, now known as X. But feel free to reach out, folks. I love talking about AI, and there's so much to it right now. I was talking to one of our statewide people that's been in technology, educational technology since the mid-90s, and he said there's been 3 great epochs in my career. When the internet hit 99, when the iPad hit in 2008, and AI this year. And I think this is something that's going to keep changing and adapting, and we have to adapt with it and think very much about creativity and curiosity and caution when it comes to AI. A couple questions here thanks John for dropping these. So you asked a good question here about, is it possible to define AI and distinguish it from previous tech that led to it at Grammar Check? So thinking about AI, this is a question I've gotten a few people over the last couple of days. So there's different types of AI. And one of the things that we did in the state of Utah, my day job, UN, we actually built a class around the first 3 units. It's through Canvas. First 3 modules are very much focused on the history of AI. And so we look at the different types of AI, like large language models, but also prior work with algorithmic thinking, basically. So there's been that's where it's kind of sorting for you and answering questions. That's what we're talking about with like Grammar Check and things like that. One of my favorite examples of that's recent is there was a great study, I think I read it in the New York Times, where now we can AI-fueled AIs that are basically radiologists digitally are better at checking for cancer than human radiologists. And so there's some really interesting work with that. And then over the last year, we're starting to see that proliferation again of large language models, generative AIs, and generative image and video AIs. And so the technology really caught up with our dreams of AI, and that's what we're seeing, and that's the difference there. Is there an AI tool to assess the work of other AI tools? You can actually have AI do that itself if you ask it to reevaluate its work or evaluate other AI work. It's kind of interesting. I've done some of that with Bard because I'm the Google guy in my state, and it's been interesting with that. Or detect the AI was an author of a piece. That is absolutely something you can do. There's lots of great resources out there for it. If you're interested, shoot me an email, John. I have a whole stack of resources on AI generated, how to detect AI generation. And with that said, I hit the end of my questions there. Conceithia, are you guys there?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Awesome.
Oh, Matt, thanks so much for today's session, and thanks for teaching all of us more about curating curiosity in the classroom. What an amazing time. For everyone that's still on, if you have attended a webinar, today's session included, or you've watched the replay, you are eligible to obtain a PD certificate. We'll drop the website in the chat for you to go to request your certificate. And as we progress in this AI world, let's remember that adaptability is the key to navigating this fast evolution. Swivl is committed to standing by your side and providing the resources, tools, and expertise needed to create resilient learning communities. To partner with us and learn more about the Adaptability Initiative, you can visit our website. And thanks again, Matt, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great evening. Thanks
Thanks,
again.
everyone. Take care. Have a good night.